in the purview of emotions, the idea behind this quote from President Snow, who's essentially the antagonistic dictator of the community of Panem, which is where it takes place in this sort of fantastical, futuristic United States. Um, obviously we'll play the clip, but hope being stronger, the only emotion stronger than fear, and then obviously we will discuss. Let it play.
She shot an arrow at your head.
Well, at an apple.
Near your head. Sit down. Seneca, why do you think we have a winner?
What do you mean?
I mean, why do we have a winner? I mean, if we just wanted to intimidate the districts, why not round up 24 of them at random and execute them all at once? It'd be a lot faster. Hope.
Hope?
Hope. It is the only thing stronger than fear. A little hope is effective. A lot of hope is dangerous. A spark is fine, as long as it's contained.
So,
contain it.
Yeah. So it's a particularly chilling scene if you're familiar with the movie. I don't want to spoil anything, but obviously, as I'm sure many of you know, it's the reference to executing 24 children is the Hunger Games, which, you know, obviously the purpose of it from the perspective of that man, President Snow, is to impart fear and impart dominance over the land. And you know, I think that it reminds me, that particular quote, why we make some of the choices as human beings that we do, and how we're able to navigate some of our negative emotions by overcoming them with positive emotions, right? There are plenty of things we do probably on a daily basis that are scary, that impart fear, but we do them for a particular payoff. And I think that he absolutely is correct. I absolutely relate to that particular quote. There are plenty of times in my life, and I would advise others if I have the um, I suppose, what's the word, power to say that, to not let fear suppress hope. And I think that hope is, you know, it's interesting, right? When sometimes we look back on some of our choices and we wonder, how did I muster up the courage to do that? How did I muster up the whatever the preparation, right? Whatever it took to achieve or even fail at a particularly scary task. The answer is more than often hope, right? I think that is something that is it is a driving force in a lot of the choices that we make, whether we identify that, recognize that, or not. And I think that it's important to embrace that and lean into it, and to understand and remember in moments of potential fear that hope is very often, if not always, a is worth striving for, even when faced with something that could result in a negative outcome.
Well, I'm not going to say too much about the hope aspect, because I could go on a long tangent there, and then I'll just tell people that as you know, I do have an episode on the philosophy of hope.
Oh yeah.
But what I will say is, actually, to me, the more interesting part of that was when he says, a little bit of hope, good. I'm paraphrasing. A little bit of hope, good. Too much hope, and that's dangerous. Um, and by the way, I also have a episode on that relationship between, like, you know, the state giving the people too much hope in order to preserve it, and etc. And that's psychological power part two. But I um digress. But anyway, I think that's really interesting because that's something that I'm thinking about a lot is if you want to control a group of people, I've kind of concluded in my mind that the best way to do that is to have overt control disguised as, like, to have power over a certain group, but have that be disguised in something else. And the way to disguise that is to make the people think that they still have some degree of hope or power, let's say, or capacity to change things, and uh, obtain their desires, whatever they may be. And so, um, and the reason for that is because if overt force is not necessarily stable, because people then know it and recognize it, and you crush them, and so when you crush them, they have nothing to lose. They're just gonna revolt and go all out. And if they have too much hope, they're gonna realize that they have so much power and a legitimate chance to change things. So they're also going to not fall in line and disobey because they're going to see that they have the capacity to change things. But if you keep it at a minimum where they have a little bit, or you make them think they have a little bit, then they're not likely to necessarily completely revolt against you because they still think they can get what they want. But in reality, the system is such that what they can get is incredibly limited. So you keep on giving them ounces and ounces and ounces of hope, thinking they can get there. But in reality, you've closed that door, but they don't know it. So I thought that was an interesting thing, but that's not really relevant to your
Well,
quotes.
no, it's interesting because it's interesting that you had that impression because I was going to say, and I guess you proved me wrong, it's sort of an open-ended point that he's making to his colleague, Seneca Crane. He doesn't even necessarily detail what the hope is going to do for himself, right? He's not really necessarily laying out for the audience what the power is going to earn him. And that was kind of the impression that I had. But to me, what I took away from that is it doesn't necessarily matter because the way that he's controlling people is their own emotion, and the stronger that emotion is, the more successful he's going to be. So finding which emotions are particularly strong in the typical person is his route to control, which is an interesting thing when you think about and realize the fact that it almost doesn't really matter which emotions those are as long as they're strong. And that's kind of an interesting point that I certainly took away from it. But and I'm interested in, impressed that you took a little bit more of a specific route to that analysis.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I do. This is something that's on my mind very frequently. So, but anyway, I won't dwell on this, and maybe we should move on.